Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Cammy Goes Keto, where I'm working on transitioning from a standard American diet to a ketogenic diet and lifestyle, and all of what that entails, which is like a transitioning lots of different things in my life because how I eat has a lot to do with how I think and how I feel, and lots of other things that go on in my life. So today we are talking about the facade of life and how when I first started talking to Mike this morning before we started recording, I said, "Do you ever feel like you sometimes don't like who you are?" And that's where I'm feeling today because of my lovely, which now I guess I could call now off plan eating, because I proceeded to binge for like a week, like eating all kinds of ultra processed foods and things like that. And over the last couple of days, I've just been eating some food that really should not be on my plan, that just has too many carbs on it. And yesterday I actually did crave some cucumbers. I was like, oh, I like cucumbers. And I was like, oh, this is a good sign. I'm coming back around to getting off of the ultra processed sugar and flour items. And also I'm getting off of the caffeine, which I drank on my trip. And I think that was a really good prelude to some disaster. So learning still, going through the process, and just really feeling like I'm not so thrilled with who I am and what's going on in my life right now because of my actions and thoughts and feelings, and not a fun place to be.
Right. Yeah, and we were talking about it, and again, I do believe that what you're hitting on here today is the core of our work and the core of what we do is that we have to let down the mask. We're really good at, and you almost did it. We talked about it, but you had an affect where you're just, not happy, not pleased, didn't have a smile or anything. And then we were getting ready to start it up, and he said, "Okay, here we go, deep breath," and there you go. You cranked up a smile, and you're ready to rock and roll, and hide it behind it. And we talked about you've talked many times about having to hold it together is an interesting line. In the operating room when you used to drink, you wouldn't do it during the week, and you're able to hold it together, and you're able to, here comes another patient. I'm not going to feel today because I got work to do or whatever. And we all do that. That was the coping mechanism of addiction. That is the coping mechanism of being in a bad place when you were younger and older. Anytime in your life you learned a habit that you could soothe with the sugar, and you could, it was your job almost to make you appear to the world that you're fine. I'm fine. And people ask you how you do. I'm fine. I'm fine. And you never talk it out, never work it out, never process any of this stuff. But there is also a second component, and I think this is relative for you, especially you just threw in the caffeine when we turned the recorder on. So I got a little more ammunition, and you were coming off of the Cymbalta, which is brave in and of itself. I mean, there was just an announcement yesterday or the day before about the government trying to come on, to reduce this kind of ridiculous prescribing for people, all the kind of SSRIs and whatever. But then you've got the caffeine and the, carbohydrates or sugar. And so biochemically, your brain is not your friend this morning. Your brain is like, it's got a dopamine shortage. It's like, I've talked about this before, and I think part of yours, especially when you add the reduction of the SSRI, is the caffeine withdrawal takes a long time, and it's pretty nasty, and it's pretty low affect. It's very anhedonia producing. You feel like there's any joy in the world, and you're not right with the world. I think biochemically you're probably right where all of this confluence of stuff is happening with you. And we talked about or not the possibility, the necessity that there has to be biochemical repair going along with the emotional understanding and processing, right? You have to get to the point where at least you're on the upswing of reducing your dependency on a substance to manage that, and it's more holistic, and you're managing it through exercise and walking and yoga and massage and pedicures and manicures and hugs and calling friends. So you have different ways of cold plunge for sure would be perfect for you today. Elevating your dopamine receptors and all of the brain and body reward chemicals that do not include caffeine, Cymbalta, or carbohydrates, you know? And it's that exercise biochemically, physically you need to pair with the emotional work that you obviously demonstrated in this podcast over the months that you're willing to do, but it's sometimes it all comes and bites you in the butt at the same time. And that's where you are now. So, I mean,
Mhm,
no
that's
harm,
definitely what I'm feeling.
no harm, no foul, just one foot in front of the other. One of the things I wanted to say before we even talked is that you seem to recover much quicker from any lapses, really fast. It's almost like days. This one was a little deeper, more intense with the trip and the caffeine and whatever, and that you're coming off the Cymbalta. So there's a lot to this where you are right now. But I know you know all this stuff intellectually, and I was sharing in one of our sauna uh, sessions the other day where someone was asking about this exact topic, and I had akined it to, I think we actually maybe talked about it a couple weeks ago, but it's akin to meditation. So you're learning to meditate, right? And your monkey mind just keeps thinking about your whole life and you won't shut up. And everybody thinks they're doing it wrong. But the exercise, the work, the practice is to acknowledge it, not dwell on it, let it float by, and return to the breath. And the same thing here is just now you just acknowledge it, accept it, return to the tools, return to the exercise, return to the walking, return to the calling friends, and you'll pop right out of it. You know, it's just like you're coming back to the breath. It's that simple and that quick. And I think you're ready. It's like you know this, you know, these are tools we all know, but executing them is like that reference to meditation where you're always seem to be chattering up there and you can't, you know, focus on the breath, focus on the breath. This is, you know, focus on the recovery, I guess the best way to put it. But, you know, it's and I think the worst part of it is this we beat ourselves up. We just we're just tough on ourselves. We're just mean to ourselves. And that's harder work. That's harder work to recognize and harder work to let go of because it's been there, but we always shut it up with some substance. And now it's going to be there more for the next year or so while you work on returning to the positives.
Yeah, well, I don't even know how much of a return it is because I've been using sugar since I was 2 or 3, so, it's like a new way of being, and it's just, yeah, I'm kinda sitting in some misery, but, yeah, one of the things that I try, you know, to understand is why I do this, like, why do I do this? Like, I was cruising along, and I think that part of I was having some issues with, like, no drama in my life. There's no excitement, there's no drama, there's no bells and lights and whistles and pink sparkly things and, and also so I'm looking for some drama and excitement, and when I was on my trip and I was drinking caffeine, it was so exciting. I mean, I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna go have a cup of coffee this morning like other people do, and I'm gonna put my cream in it, and I'm gonna drink that caffeine, and then I'm gonna drink another one."
So let's separate that one thing out. Was that the social aspect of it or was it the buzz?
But it was multifactorial. It was social to be feeling connected and, like, normal, whatever that is. Like, I'm okay, like, I'm normal, like, "Look, I can drink this and be okay." And it was a lot of sneaking, like, people weren't like, yeah, kinda my girlfriend knew that I was drinking caffeine on my trip and that normally I don't, but she doesn't quite understand addiction and she didn't really understand what that meant. And then it was also like being out of control, like letting myself be out of control, like not having to,
Letting your hair down.
yeah, letting my hair down, like not having to be in my little box where I'm doing things right and I'm looking right and all of that. And then there's the biochemical, and, what caffeine does to you and how it was increasing my energy and making me feel, kind of elated and happy. And, yeah, so I was, happy as a clam out there, just, imbibing.
Got it.
And the other thing that's interesting is that I didn't really care about the ramifications of what was going to happen after. I didn't not one time did I think about how hard it was gonna be to pull off of it, because I was on vacation. I deserve to have my caffeine. I work hard, whatever excuse it was. And the other thing too is that I don't really care when I'm doing those things, when I'm out there, in the world doing my binging or whatever. It doesn't bother me how mean and cruel and bad I am to myself. Like, it doesn't bother me that I'm doing these things to myself that are so detrimental that in the long run are, like now, okay, I binged for 8 days. It's gonna take me over 2 months to get back on track. And the caffeine is gonna probably take longer than that. But to even get the weight off, if you're looking at the weight, you binge for 8 days, it's gonna take me 8 to 10 weeks.
So here's the thing. I mean, I want this to be a teaching moment for everyone and for you, I'm hoping. And this has been a frustration of mine for a decade, couple decades now. That the lack of respect that these products create, because I believe, and you please correct me if you think I'm wrong, the draw to the doing, and whether it's biochemical or the jolt of sneaking, the jolt of being normal, the jolt of being with your friends and seeming normal. We've often talked about here and in the program when the F it, or when it comes to F it, when you're there, when you say fuck it, it's like you call somebody, you gotta shut down and close your door and not do a damn thing when your mind starts to say fuck it. Because if you're there, you're not in a good place, you're not in good company. You've gone to the dark side and you're going out. You're gonna do what you're gonna do, whatever. And then that's because, again, that you have a memory, a muscle memory, a body memory of the soothing that it creates. And that's the frustration here. The frustration for me and teaching people and for you and executing here is that this shit is powerful. I mean, mentally, biochemically, emotionally, it is a powerful anesthesia. And I get a lot of grief for speaking this way. It's not oxy, it's not cocaine, it's not heroin, it's not cigarettes. But damn it, I believe it's the worst pandemic the world has ever known. We have gone from a great majority of the underserved world being malnourished and skinny to obese because the food they are getting now is just terrible for them. And there is no other explanation. Like, there's no other explanation anymore. We cannot write it off to, I'm not eating less and exercising more. I'm a sloth. I'm lazy. It doesn't fit the reality of the science today. It just doesn't. And you are, a classic example, a brilliant surgeon, a beauty pageant winner. Like, and you want this badly and you're struggling. And I want other people to recognize this, that the seriousness of it all, right? The life threatening. I mean, you're in your early 60s and continuing on this, and I'm not shaming you. I'm just kind of giving a meta message here, is that it's like continuing on this path, it only leads to disaster physically and emotionally and mentally. And so I'm not frustrated with you. I'm frustrated with the lack of taking this stuff seriously, people and people being confused about what's happening. And for the folks who have just tuned in, put this thing all the way back to the beginning. Go to the beginning of Dr. Cammy's videos and watch this struggle in real time, in live, and you'll see that that you have to take this very seriously, as serious as alcoholism, as serious as any other substance use disorder. We all know friends that have died because of this or relatives or something. And this one is bad, and it's slower and it appears that you have some modicum of control over it, but that's an illusion. There is a fundamental recovery tenet of substance use disorder, which is the illusion of control. And the illusion here is that when you say F it, you can handle that weekend or that week or whatever that time period, that you have the control to come back or whatever. There has to be equal parts of being afraid, that you're afraid that you don't. One of the phrases I liked a lot is, I don't have another recovery in me. You know what I mean? I personally do not have another recovery in me. I just don't.
Yeah, the serious of it. You have to understand the seriousness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with the society and the way that we live right n the way that things are, nobody is really motivated. It's really hard to find the motivation to look at your addictions and to work on getting these out of you. If you go out on the street and you take 100 people and you really thoroughly interview those people, how many of those people are going to be dealing with their caffeine addiction or their shopping addiction or their social media addiction or, you know, the food addiction? How many of those people, a lot of those people are going to be, struggling and going through life like I do, looking like you have your act together fairly well. But underneath the surface, you're really hurting and struggling for that. And I really think that a lot of happiness and a lot of true contentment is to be found by getting off of your substances. And, people don't look at that. You're just kind of in the rat race going around looking at, and so like this morning, I almost texted you and said, look, I'm not going to tape today because I didn't want to get on here and say, I feel like crap, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and I don't want to go turn myself on and do the deal. But then I did come because I wanna get better, I wanna get healthier, I'm willing to put in the work, I'm willing to do what it takes, and, for the most part, obviously, sometimes I don't.
Well, that's what I say. I mean, you're blaming yourself, but, we have to blame the substances, and moreover, we have to blame the societal and exactly what you just said, the cultural acceptance of aging looks like this, and you're going to get all these diseases, and everybody's gonna gain their dad bod, everybody's gonna be a little overweight, it's just the way it is, and it's just not true, It's not true.
And you look at the Alzheimer's and the dementia and how it's just running rampant and it's just exponential. There's some of these people living to 100, 103, 109. I heard the other day somebody's mother-in-law. But a lot of us are gonna struggle later years unless we get off of this stuff. And the
Yes.
sooner the better.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I guess we're not trying to, and we'll come up with a better word here, but sugarcoat any of this is that it's hard. It's hard more, and you've kind of described it, and really this event past week or so before was it's a social thing. It's a cultural thing that we have to overcome because we seem like the abnormal ones. We seem like the ones who are extreme. We're too much. You know, it's just not true. And one of the things, I mean, Nick Norowitz just identified a study that came out about fatty liver and sugar and fructose again today. I mean, it happens every day now. and there's a lot of people working on this. And if you pay attention, if you're plugged into that ecosystem, all the things we're talking about today are being, brought to the forefront. It's like, so I was interviewing Dr. Unwin yesterday or 2 days ago or whatever. And, I asked him my favorite thing about the fructose and the psychoactive nature, and I'm trying to study the addiction part of it. He says, Michael, if that were true, all of my bread addict clients, he says, I believe it. And I believe there's there's work, and Dr. Lustig and Dr. Johnson are brilliant. But the people who tell me they are addicted to bread, and then the reason they can't get off it is the bread and they don't really eat any sugar. It's the glucose is doing something psychoactively too, keeping you attached, yoked to the substances, right? So it's pretty universal in the sugar and flours that its body did not evolve to be ingesting this stuff, and now critical mass, crisis times.
Well,
Yeah.
and I could see just eating like, a little bit here and there. The problem is the addictive nature and the way they make all the products too, is that it's designed to make you have excessive amounts of it.
Yes.
You have a piece of bread. I mean, that's not a big deal, but you eat 5 or 6 and yeah, so I'm just feeling like such a fledgling in my recovery now. I'm like, "Well, God, I'm still like I'm back to the beginning, but that's okay." And I'm in some recovery. I'm working on my recovery, and that's what I think is really important because and then I also am thinking about, gosh, when I get back and in a couple of weeks, I get this stuff out of my system and I'm not feeling hungover and I'm going through my life and there's no bells and whistles and excitement and pink and glitter. I'm just going to be so grateful.
But you have to keep your vision on that. That's kind of your emotional, intellectual why. You should probably write it down again and describe that life. That stuff works. I mean, that really is powerful. And look, you have to give yourself some grace and some leeway that you are tackling the Cymbalta right now. So that's never, I mean, some people talk about years and serious psychological or, brain type injuries from it. And those are coming out more daily. That stuff is serious, and the level of your sensitivity, that as high sensitive as you are, you gotta give yourself some grace that you're, these are all problems. These are all things that are going to affect you emotionally, and let alone physically and biochemically.
Well, it's been interesting too talking to people about being out there and binging. And, you know, 5 different people told me they're like, just get back on track. You're going to be okay. You're going to get back. You're going to, and when you're in the middle of it and you're trying to get up and out of it, it doesn't feel like that to me. It felt like, God, I'm just going to be here forever. I'll never be able to overcome this
We
because
have
it gets such a grip on you.
Yeah, we also have to visit the shame is the payoff idea, right? We have to visit the idea that, okay, yeah, you had a blast and you were normal for 10 days, 7 days, whatever it was, and you were with your friends and you were social and, you were sneaking a little bit and you were doing all the things that you were think you want to do, and that your body's biochemistry feels good. And it always feels good for 10 or 15 days. And then all of a sudden that'll turn on you too. And you'll have this crazy roller coaster you'll be on, and you'll have to have the stuff, so you don't want to go there. But what I was going to say, as far as the shame, and this is a little bit harder construct, like why the hell would anybody do it for the shame? Because it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. It brings you back to, my family sayings, "You're getting too big for your britches." The Marianne Williamson, what's his name? The guy that he wrote it at for his inauguration in South Africa. What was that guy's name? Anyway, it's, who are you to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and like, who are you not to be? You know what I mean? He died, and knowing you after all this, time and your mother and everything, we did not grow up with that attitude. You know, the attitude that we grew up with is, you know, getting our put in our place is what used to happen to me. You know, like you couldn't brag about something because maybe your brothers or your sisters weren't doing this well, and you had to tone it down. There was nowhere to celebrate your wins. There's no talk of your very little talk of your wins.
And there was no support of them either. I was journaling about this yesterday
Yeah.
when I was waiting at the Apple Store, and there was no, like, because Rob Cyrus talks about, you know, pride-based, motivation and how you wanna have this, pride in what you do. Like, for me, I mean, I remember here and there some of it, but it wasn't an underlying theme of, like, supporting things that you did that were well, you know? Like,
Right.
I'd bring home a B and I'd say, "Why didn't you get an A?" And I'd say, "Everybody else got a C." And, it was kinda like,
Right. Yeah, and so becoming or having using substances or a party or whatever you wanna call it to bring you back to that common underlying undertow of your emotions is real. It's very real, and you have to fight it, and you have to bring all this stuff that we talk about in the intellectual realm to your emotional body, and I think I said something earlier that I think I wanna double down on is that you have to, go away today and journal. Are you afraid of this enough? Are you scared of it enough? You know, there's two modalities that people have, and that is they move towards pleasure or away from pain. And it's almost to the point, and I heard somebody that was doing it very well in a well balanced way, like a why, but they were doing it with both sides of the coin. They were, they're describing what their life would be like in the positive, and then they were describing if they didn't do what they were attempting to do, what would happen if they didn't save money, if they didn't, whatever it was, And I think you need to write this down. I think you need to write down Cammy at 70 or Cammy at 65 who continues on this path. I think you need to have an adequate base of something to move away from, some outcome that you want to move away from. You don't dwell on it because, that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but you actually create it, you know, this thought like, I'll tell you true stories. My kids were gifted, right? And are gifted. And they were 13 years old or 14, they got into the International Baccalaureate program. And in the state of Florida, if you get a degree in high school from the International Baccalaureate program, you don't have to pay for any of the Florida schools. University of Florida, University of Miami, USF, you could
"Wow."
go to all these great schools, right? And for free, not just for like for free. Like just having that degree gives you this, confers you this thing. But their peers were going to Princeton and Harvard, you know what I mean? And there was no way I was paying for it at that time. It was not gonna be possible. There's no way that I could have paid 100 plus thousand, 120 almost $1,000 a year for 4 years. One of them was 5 years because he got an advanced degree. And I just said to him, and, you get in and the money will be there, right? And I would literally, through that 4-year period, have this conversation with myself where they brought the admissions to that school, that good school, whatever it was. They ended up going to Notre Dame, and I couldn't pay, and they couldn't go. And I just couldn't let that happen. You know what I mean? I just wouldn't let it happen because I was moving away from the outcome that I had visualized. You know what I mean? And so I really do believe that there has to be an equal amount of your why because some people are not motivated by their movement towards pleasure or success or whatever it is, accomplishment. They are more motivated and much more proficient in their activities if they're moving away from a deadline, if they're moving away from an outcome they don't want to even think about kind of thing. They know what that outcome, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is or how it works, but if they just are aware just enough that that outcome could be, it helps. And again, I got to find this guy again, but he talked about a more balanced approach. I actually personally do move away from negativity. I do not move towards pleasure. Right. I just was like we just discussed, I was never taught. There was never any reinforcement, but there was a shitload of reinforcement to move away from the negative, which was getting your ass whacked. You know what I mean? There was a lot of motivation there. So I learned that technique of let me figure out, make sure that doesn't happen again and do whatever behavior I need.
Yeah.
And so it does, but everybody has whatever their modality, whatever their way of solving that is.
Well, and the other thing that comes to mind about that, like, I think this is really a great topic to think about moving toward the positive and away from the negative and doing some journaling about that. I'll work on that. It comes up the word deserve. And I want to ask like your experience and expertise on that word because sometimes I'll feel like, well, a lot of times I'll feel like, you don't deserve to have an extraordinary life. You don't deserve to have like, a wonderful man and a hot, healthy body and money to do all the things that you want to do and, you know, true contentment and joy. You don't deserve that. Life is meant to suffer. You need to go around and suffer all the time.
Well, first of all, I don't think that you intellectually believe that. I know that's true, and I know I don't. I think the problem is similar to a lot of this work is that you have to surface what you just described from your subconscious because I think that could be a mimetic type of this term mimetic, this like this is the voice of your mother or this is the voice of my father, you know what I mean? This is the unconscious voice that that you question yourself that maybe they were right. Maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I should, whatever, you know what I mean? And I think the work is to uncover the unconscious nature of what you're describing. You know what I mean? And it's very real because no healthy or normal person would say, I'm not worthy. But underneath that, there is this feeling, weird disembodied feeling that, yeah, that might be the case that maybe I'm not worthy, right? Maybe I'm not. And
Well, maybe you're not worthy because you're not perfect. I mean, that's the way that I felt growing up. It
yeah,
was like when I would fall short, it'd be
right.
like, oh, I'm not worthy. I got a 92 instead of 100.
Yep. Right. Yeah. That's it, it manifests in different people different ways. A lot of people are nowhere near 90s in that type of part of their life, but they still feel it in whatever. They're not an inadequate mother. They're not an adequate husband. They're whatever. They're not an adequate father. Whatever it is, they're feeling it. And then they go use whatever their substance is because it's too much to feel. It's just genuinely too much to feel that you're not worthy, that you don't deserve. Those are feelings, got to be some of the worst feelings on the planet, because even though you didn't do anything wrong, it's the whole, if you do something shameful, you feel shame. But this is shame based, where you feel like this all the time, undertone that's not conscious because for the most part, you're anesthetizing that feeling with
Yeah.
the
A lot of
substance.
that lives with me. A lot of that lives with me.
I believe it
And
too.
I soothe
Yeah.
my inadequacies.
Yes. Yeah. No, your perceived inadequacies, it's not,
Yes.
you don't have inadequacies. You're perfect just the way you are. And that's another thing that's very difficult for shame based people to accept. It's because their love or whatever it was, however they came up, was conditional. It was performance based. It was, yeah, performance based. Yeah, it's and this has been one of the best episodes I think we ever did because the complexity, I don't want to make this process complex. I want to give people a simple way to do it, but there is no simple way because everybody's move away from, the depth of their worthiness or inadequacy feeling is an important part of the equation, right? But it all one of the things I gotta say before we close, and we both gotta go, but it is really begins with abstinence. You can't even know the depth of your what we've been talking about until you just no longer have this stuff in your system to rely on. And the scary part is you gotta keep an eye out that you don't become a long distance runner who hurts your knees and, ruined you don't substitute something else. You just stop that stuff and deal with the emotional part of your life that has been the reason you've been using all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a balance, right? Because you have to get the stuff out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's and that's one of the problems I'm having in my Overeaters Anonymous recovery with my sponsor is that, it talks about getting the stuff out of your system before you start working on your action steps, which are steps 4 through 9. And step 4 is an inventory where you look at your resentments and your fears and, you really start getting into the nitty gritty of what creates who you are and why you're doing this and helps you start to figure out how to be different. But you have to be off the stuff. And so we were working on steps 1, 2, and 3. And I got to day 50 and we're like, okay, I'm ready. I've been off this stuff for a while. Let's do my resentments. Now I'm falling off.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, I get it.
But you got to keep trying. In closing, you just got to keep getting back on the horse.
You absolutely do. It does. It takes whatever it takes. And that's a reality of it. And I've known a lot of people a lot worse than you that went for decades, trying back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and so
But I think it's like smoking. I learned in medical school that when people try to quit smoking and they start smoking again, you always motivated them to try to quit again because studies had shown that they will quit. Sometimes it takes 3 tries, sometimes it takes 15, sometimes, but if they keep trying, eventually they will quit. And so that's, what I'm doing.
never quit quitting.
Never quit quitting. There you go.
That
All right.
becomes
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate this discussion, and I'm so glad I'm here with you, and I'm so glad that you're here with me.
you're doing it. Keep doing it.
All right, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.